All right, so we're diving into something a little different today. It's visual. It's all about graphics, actually. Specifically, the big graphics update that hit iRacing
Yes,
recently.
yeah. Big change for a lot of people.
Yeah, and whether you're, out there setting lap records every night, or you're thinking about getting into sim racing, or maybe you just find this kind of tech interesting, this is, I think, a pretty fascinating case study. We're going to use one user's really detailed account of their experience to kind of see what this update was all about, why it went so well for some people, and, why it didn't go so well for others, and also what it might mean for the future of how iRacing looks.
Exactly. I mean, we're not just talking about a simple, visual refresh here. This update really digs into the guts of the simulation. And when you make that kind of change to a platform that people are so passionate about, well, there are going to be some ripples. We'll get into those.
Yeah, absolutely. So to set the stage, let's go back to, before this update. Like, what did iRacing look like before they rolled out this whole new graphics thing?
Right, right.
Well, our source described it as kind of flat, almost like there was this permanent yellowish haze hanging over everything.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I've heard that before.
Yeah, even like shiny car paint or metal surfaces, they had this sort of plasticky look to them,
Mm.
according to our source. And the shadows, they were there, but they weren't exactly, pulling you into the scene.
Right, right. I think a lot of the longtime iRacing users are probably nodding along right now.
Totally. It did the job, it worked, but visually,
Yeah.
it wasn't exactly cutting edge.
No, not really. But, for a long time, iRacing was and still is known for its, laser-focused accuracy in the physics and the track modeling. Those laser scan tracks, they're incredible. And the visuals, well, they were always more on the functional side, not really keeping pace with some other games out there.
Yeah. And that actually led to a really interesting phenomenon in the community, like a whole culture of DIY visual enhancement.
Oh, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah, it was almost like a rite of passage to tinker with settings, trying to squeeze out that extra bit of visual fidelity. You saw reshade filters everywhere, people messing with gamma settings, going deep into those NVIDIA and AMD control panels, even saving specific monitor presets. Our source even had their own cinema preset just for like sunset races.
That's dedication right there.
It really is. It shows you how much people cared about getting the best possible look out of the old graphics engine.
Absolutely. They weren't content with just good enough. They wanted it to look as good as it felt to drive.
Exactly. Then, boom, the update drops, and everything changes. Like, seriously changes. Our source describes it as a massive overhaul. Full HDR support, high dynamic range for anyone who doesn't know. Basically, you get way more detail in the bright and dark areas of the image.
A huge difference, like night and day, literally sometimes.
Yeah, and then they change the way the sun behaves, how the atmosphere scatters light so it looks more realistic, and they added these new PBR shaders. That's physically based rendering. Basically, it makes materials react to light in a more realistic way. It's pretty technical, but it makes a big difference visually.
Yeah, it's all about getting those materials to respond to light the way they would in the real world.
Right, and the impact, from what our source says, was pretty dramatic. They talk about shadows that dance, light that blooms, and reflections that actually shimmer.
It's those little details that really sell the realism.
Yeah, they really wanted to create a world that felt more dynamic, more alive.
Exactly. Not just a static image.
Right. And for some people, it worked amazingly well. Like our source talks about loading up Sebring at golden hour, sunrise or sunset, and just being blown away by how real it looked. Like literally gasping at the difference.
Yeah, I can imagine. When it works, it really works. You get that HDR doing its thing, the PBR making the materials look just right, and the lighting is just perfect.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing.
It's that I'm actually there moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's what sim racing is all about, right? That
Yeah.
feeling of immersion.
Totally. But of course, the story doesn't end there because, well, not everyone had that same experience. For a lot of people, the reaction was, let's just say, less enthusiastic.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't a universal hallelujah moment. Things got complicated.
Yeah, a lot of users felt like the sunlight was way too bright, almost blinding. The shadows were so dark they were just like black holes. And the overall colors looked kind of icy and washed out.
So you have some people loving it, some people hating it. That tells you right away that there's more to the story. This isn't a simple thing.
Exactly. And it wasn't just about personal preference either. A lot of people reported pretty noticeable performance drops, especially in VR, which is already demanding enough on your computer, right? And what's even weirder is that some of the older tracks like Suzuka and Oulton Park, they apparently looked Well, our source said downright broken with the new lighting.
Broken, huh? That's not good. That sounds like some compatibility issues right there.
Yeah, and that's actually a big part of the problem. Turns out a lot of the negative reactions were coming from people who had spent years tweaking their settings for the old lighting system, all those reshade filters, gamma adjustments, all that stuff. And now those tweaks were actually working against the new engine.
Just like, imagine you have a room with really bad lighting, right? And you paint the walls bright colors to try and compensate, make it feel brighter.
Okay, yeah, I get that.
Then someone comes along and installs these huge skylights. Suddenly, all that bright paint is way too much. It looks awful. That's kind of what happened with iRacing. Those old tweaks were designed to fix the old lighting, and now they were just messing everything up.
That's a perfect analogy. Our source gave some specific examples too, like custom contrast settings that used to add a bit of punch. Now the image was just way too harsh. Gamma boosts that helped bring out details in the shadows. Suddenly everything was washed out. And reshade filters. Forget about it. They were either doing nothing or causing all kinds of weird glitches.
Yeah, you got to remember, reshade and those other tweaks, they were basically band-aids for a system who had limitations.
Yeah.
Now, the underlying system is completely different, so those band-aids don't stick anymore.
Right. And on top of all that, there were definitely some, let's call them growing pains, with people just not quite understanding the new system, like forgetting to rerun the graphics configuration tool, which is usually important after a big update, or not enabling HDR in the settings, even if their monitor could handle it.
Right, the basics.
Yeah, or not adjusting their in-game brightness. Even having outdated graphics drivers caused issues for some people.
It's easy to overlook those things, but they can make a huge difference. You got to make sure the game knows what your hardware can do. You got to make sure your hardware is up to date.
Totally. But it's important to say that not all the criticism was just user error. There were some legitimate issues with the update itself, particularly with how it handled those older tracks.
Yeah, the older tracks seem to be a real sore spot for a lot of people.
Yeah, they just didn't look right. The main problem is that those older tracks didn't have the updated shaders that the new lighting system needed, so the way light interacted with the surfaces, it just looked off. Our source said the reflections looked like plastic wrap.
Wow, it's pretty rough. Yeah, physically based rendering, it needs really detailed information about the materials to work properly. And those older tracks, well, they were built before PBR was even a thing.
Right. And there were some pretty bad examples, like the mountains at Red Bull Ring apparently glowed this weird radioactive color, not very realistic. And Charlotte Oval at night was so dark that it was basically impossible to see where you were going.
Yikes. That's a problem. Yeah, it's tough to update years and years of content overnight. And when you have a new system that relies on such specific data, like PBR does, those older assets can really stick out.
Yeah, and then VR, well, that just magnified a lot of the issues. Frame rate drops are always a concern in VR, but the sun glare was apparently blindingly bad for some people, and other visual glitches just made the whole experience really uncomfortable. Plus, there weren't any options to tint your visor or adjust the glare in VR, so people couldn't really fix it themselves.
VR is a whole other beast. You need rock solid performance and visuals that are really dialed in, or it just doesn't work. And those super bright light sources, they can be a real problem in VR. Can even make you feel sick if it's bad enough.
Yeah. But it's not all doom and gloom. Because when you get everything set up correctly, when those settings are just right, the new lighting engine can look absolutely incredible. Our source describes going back to Spa in the Porsche 911 after they, reran the config, enabled HDR, all that stuff, and it was like a different game. They said the track was glowing at sunrise as they went through Eau Rouge. The shadows looked perfect, and the reflections on the car, they were just beautiful.
That's what it's all about. When you get those moments where everything clicks, the lighting, the shaders, the car models, the environment, it's really special.
It's not just about looking pretty, it's about feeling it,
Yep.
Like you're actually there. Our source used the word cinematic, and I think that's perfect. It's about that sense of heightened realism, that visual drama that pulls you into the experience.
Exactly. It's got to be believable. It's got to make you feel something.
So for everyone out there who's still struggling with the new visuals, our source put together a really helpful checklist. Number 1, rerun the graphics configuration tool. Simple, but important.
Make sure the game is talking to your hardware correctly.
Then enable HDR in the settings if your monitor supports it. You're missing out on a lot of the detail if you don't have that turned on.
HDR is key for this new lighting system.
Next, adjust your in-game brightness and contrast. Don't just leave it where it was before the update.
Yeah, got to find that sweet spot.
Turn off any custom tweaks you made in the NVIDIA or AMD control panel. Those were for the old system.
Start fresh, let the game do its thing.
And hold off on reshade for now. The old presets aren't going to work right.
Wait for new ones specifically designed for this update.
And finally, the classic. Update your graphics drivers. Always a good idea.
Keeps everything running smooth.
For VR users, there are some great community guides out there with optimized settings. Check those out. And you might want to try reducing the bloom and glare settings if you're getting bad performance or the brightness is too much.
The VR community is great at figuring out the best settings. They're always on the cutting edge.
Looking ahead, there's still some things that could be improved with the new lighting system. Shader updates for those older tracks are definitely at the top of the list.
Yeah, got to bring those older tracks up to the same level as the newer ones.
Visor tint options would be great, especially for VR users who are getting blinded by the sun.
More control is always good.
The position of the sun could use some tweaking too, at least in some places. It can be a bit too intense at times.
Yeah, got to make sure it's realistic, but not distracting.
And finally, it would be nice to have more control over the glare and bloom levels, like a slider to adjust the intensity.
That would let people fine-tune it to their liking and their hardware.
But overall, the consensus seems to be that this new lighting engine is a big step in the right direction. Our source said the foundation is stronger than ever, even if there are still some renovations needed.
I like that. It's a good analogy. They've got the framework in place now. They just got to build on it.
So in the end, this iRacing graphics update is a pretty interesting story. It shows you the potential for incredible visuals, but it also highlights the challenges of making such a big change to a well-established platform, especially when you have a community that's so invested and they've created their own solutions to work around the old limitations.
Yeah, you can't just change the rules of the game overnight and expect everyone to be happy. It takes time to adapt, and there always going to be some bumps along the way.
It really makes you think about how technology, even when it's supposed to be an improvement, can disrupt the way we do things. It's not always a smooth transition.
Progress can be messy sometimes.
Absolutely. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this. What were your first impressions of the iRacing graphics update? Did you hit any of those roadblocks we talked about? And have you had those moments where the new visuals just blew you away? Let us know, because this is a conversation we're all having together.
Yeah, chime in. We're all learning as we go here.
All right, that's it for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
See you next time.